Graham Watson, Liberal Democrat MEP for the South West. What is the EU Solidarity Fund and what can it be used for?
Well, this is a fund with about £400 million in it this year, set up around 10 years ago to deal with natural disasters. Any country that has a big challenge, whether it's forest fires in Portugal or whether it's flooding last year in Denmark and the Czech Republic, can apply for support from this fund with the costs of the cleanup.
Usually there is a €3 billion threshold for countries to apply, countries like the UK to apply to this fund. Why are you convinced that even if the level is less in the southwest, that an application, a successful application, could still be made?
Well, there is no threshold, but the guidelines work on a basis of the population and the wealth of a member state to decide what approximately the level should be. However, those guidelines allow member states, particularly the larger member states, to apply for help with regional emergencies. And my argument is that in my region, the southwest, and increasingly now in the southeast, this is becoming a regional emergency. We applied successfully in 2007 in Gloucestershire for a very much smaller amount, £120 million I think, and got it. And I am convinced, having spoken to the Commissioner, that we would have a good chance of getting support again.
And that was really what I wanted to ask you next, because I know you went to meet with the region's commissioner here in Brussels, the man ultimately in charge of this fund. What did he have to say about whether the Southwest would have a good case?
Well, I wanted to check that indeed it was still possible to apply for smaller amounts. The Commissioner said yes, it is. He believed we would have a good case, and I think there is some bewilderment here that the United Kingdom has not already put in an application for what the whole of Europe recognises has been a bout of very severe weather with quite devastating consequences.
Now, the minister in charge, the floods minister, wrote to you and told you that at the time at least, and this was in late January, that money from Europe was not needed and that the UK would not qualify. We have more recently heard that it does sound like the government may well put in an application. Do you see this as something of a U-turn from the government?
I'm not sure it's a U-turn. It has been under discussion among ministers. No decision has yet been taken, but it seems likely that the UK may now go ahead and apply. I certainly hope so. The government has announced a fund of £10 million to help businesses, but we can ill afford to do this at a time when public spending is already under pressure. It seems to me eminently sensible to apply for funding from a fund into which our taxpayers already pay, rather than allowing other countries to go ahead and do it and be subsidising them.
You mentioned back in 2007 the floods in Gloucestershire and the fact that an application for funding was put in. It was about £130 million, I think, €167 million for UK flooding. So if an application was put in, how much are we talking about, a ballpark figure for the Southwest this time round, would you expect?
Well, I remember back in 2007 I had to campaign quite hard to get the government to submit an application. The Treasury was resisting it, as I believe is the case again this time. But looking at the kind of damage we've now seen, I think that we would be applying for more than we did back in 2007, simply because the effects of this severe weather have covered a much greater area. And it doesn't really matter whether you're talking about flood defences in Devon and Cornwall, or flooding in Devon and Somerset and Gloucestershire and Hampshire and Surrey, or whether you're talking about power cuts in areas where power lines have come down. There is going to be a very substantial cost to businesses and to communities, and I hope the government is doing the sensible thing in looking to Europe for help.
So you're talking there potentially hundreds of millions of pounds from Europe.
Let's see what the government can estimate, but let us keep pressing the government, because if they want to apply, they have to do so within 10 weeks of the onset of the severe weather. Now, that was before Christmas. It leaves them barely a fortnight to get an application in.
Just finally, in that letter from the flooding minister, they talk about the phrase they use is, we should not be hasty in turning to this fund given the wider implications on the budget size. Isn't it a fact that by taking money from this fund, it's going to hit elsewhere on the UK, the amount of money the UK gets from Europe?
It certainly does not affect any of the money we get under Common Agricultural Policy or the European Social Fund or the Regional Development Fund. What it does affect is the rebate that we would get the following year. And for every pound we draw down, the Treasury loses a certain amount in rebate. If I think back to 2007, it lost about 30 pence in rebate. There's still a considerable net gain for the UK for drawing down from this funding, and I think we should not be allowing the Treasury to dictate what the Department for Communities and Local Government can do. That department recognises the problems faced by householders and by businesses right across the south of the country with this disastrous flooding.